Welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am joined by the creator of one of my favorite graphic novels to come out in the past few years. The first volume is an absolute wonder, and I am so excited to get to talk about the second one, which is by the time that you hear this, it'll be out, and I am so excited. So welcome. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Sure. My name is Patrick Horvath, and I'm the cartoonist behind Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, Rite of Spring.
Thank you so much for taking the time to share this with us. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey as a creative? I know that you've worked in film and comics. What was that? What was your journey like?
Sure. It was a strange one. I mean, I started in making comics when I was really young. I've been drawing pretty much since I was like 3 or 4. And I think I made my first comics when I was maybe like 5. And it would be like they were really simple, like one page panels, and they'd be telling a real simple story, like going to tea party at a monster's house or something like that. And my mom would help me would type out the captions, and then for each panel, and then I would, and I'd be doing the drawings, and then we'd bind it together, and she helped me bind it and stuff. And then we put together these little, they're comics basically. I mean, it was just sequential art, right? And I was telling a story, and so it's kind of funny. It had always kind of been the thing, a way to just tell a story. And I love drawing. And so it wasn't until I was probably 18 that I would do like these comics like throughout the years, like throughout my adolescence, doing stuff for like the school newspaper, little comic strips. And then when I was 18, I had the idea, I just really fell in love with film, wanted to become a filmmaker. And so a lot of that drawing just went by the wayside. And I never really had like formal training other than just public school, art classes and stuff like that. And then I was just real. I grew up in Iowa in the Midwest, so I had this notion that it was going to be virtually impossible for me to become a filmmaker unless I just threw everything I had into it. And I went through the film program at University of Iowa, but it was, I got out of that, and then it was just sort of floundering in my early 20s until I just started basically doing like DIY stuff. So bought a couple of like, and this is around like 2005, and so HD wasn't really a thing yet. And so I just bought like spring wound Bolex film cameras and shot it on 16 millimeter and just would made a little tiny feature on my own credit cards doing that. And so in drawing wise, I was like storyboarding and stuff for my projects, but like really it was still like nothing fancy. That was more like just a practical application of all that stuff. And so it wasn't honestly until I moved out, and then after like 2005, I was living in Chicago at the time, made this tiny movie, and then I ended up, and like maybe like a couple dozen people have seen it. Like it's just not, it was a thing. It was a thing to do. It was very educational. It was a great experience, but like it just, it was just this weird little movie I made. And then by the time I was ready to move on, it was like 2006. I moved out to Los Angeles, and by 2008, I was writing, directing my first little feature out here, and it was like a horror comedy called Diner, spelled DIE-NER. Get it? It's the full title. And the experience of that was really fun, and I was having a good time, like building up just a group of like friends, professionals, and friends that all worked within the industry and wanted to make stuff. And so continued that forward with a good friend of mine. I co-wrote and co-directed a film called Entrance. And then off of that, we wrote and directed another film. It was a sequel to this film called The Pact. And then it was right around like Entrance time. So it was like 2010 that I was like, man, I miss drawing. And so this whole time from like 98 until like 2010, I was like, I hadn't really been drawing like doodle and stuff, but I was like, I just really miss drawing, and I miss being creative in a small scale where I can control everything. And so, and to come up with an idea and then create the idea and like actualize the idea within like an hour. Like, you know, what a concept instead of like years of like making a movie. So, and I I found that I just loved it. And I started watercoloring and doing ink. And that just in and of itself was so satisfying. And I was like, well, I mean, and the whole time, like I'd been reading comics in my adolescence, and I took a big break from it. And then after college, in my early mid 20s, I got back into comics. And it was a whole different, like in the early, like mid 90s, it was all like Image had become a thing, Image Comics, and that whole, you know, sort of, it was, I mean, it was such a big thing that even in like Iowa is like very much like, oh yeah, here's like there's this whole new thing now, and that was more interesting to me than like DC or Marvel at the time. And then, but then I sort of fell off of that, and then got into like more like interesting stuff like Charles Burns comics or like Daniel Klaus or Chris Ware and things like that were really speaking to me, or like Jean Giraud Mobius stuff from France was really interesting, and so I was sort of having my horizons broaden that way. And I was like, yeah, this stuff speaks to me. I'm really weird at heart. So like a lot of that stuff, it was obvious. Like I do appreciate more of the sort of commercial comic stuff from DC and Marvel, for sure. But it's at heart, I feel like I like just being weird, and I love it when I find just a creator whose voice is so strange and unique and really speaks to me, resonates with me. So I was like, I need to make some weird little comics. Like I would love, like, what a great way to storytell. I could self-publish. Like, that's the best thing about comics is like, you're only limited by basically, you know, you doing it.
Mm.
And so that was sort of the trajectory I found myself on. And so like around 6 years of just like trying to really actually making an effort to improve my drawing and storytelling and making little comics and self-publishing stuff, or working for self-published stuff like writer Josh Trujillo, who's well established now in commercial comics, but at the time was just self-publishing this zine called Love Machines, and he hired me to like draw a short for that anthology, and that was a really fun experience. But it wasn't until like 2020 that I got approached to do something that was going to be published through Image for W. Maxwell Prince's Ha Ha. And prior to that, I had done Free for All, like, and I finished that around 2020, and that was just all on my own, writing, drawing this little project, just to have an example of what my stuff looked like. And it was funny because all this stuff sort of like I finished that. I ended up doing Ha Ha issue 4, all the interiors and the cover work for it, and that was like a very satisfying experience of drawing something, and I painted it. It was all gouache and ink, and that was an experiment too. I was like, I don't know if this is going to print well or not, and it did. I liked how that turned out. So around that time, IDW reaches out randomly through a horror anthology I worked on called Southbound. One of the people from the distribution company, The Orchard, ended up at IDW randomly. Like well, I mean, just as it happens, like they were working on film TV development. His name's Paul Davidson, and so Paul Davidson was reaching out to me to possibly. We tried to develop something, and that ultimately didn't work out. It was a project from a script of his, but then he still showed my stuff to Mark Doyle, who was like director of editorial at the time for IDW. And he was like, you know, Mark Doyle really likes your, like all the stuff I was posting on Instagram. He's like, he really likes your art. He knows you're a writer as well. Would you like to talk to him? And I was like, I would like to talk. That sounds fun. And I'd also like previously I'd pitched stuff too with another writer just randomly. His name is Ben Cook, and we got, you know, interest, but ultimately rejected from all the publishers for this project we were trying to do. So I like at that point I'd been like I had pitches I was putting together, and it definitely was making an effort to try and get a book out there. So this was very interesting. So I talked with Mark, and he was just like, yeah, I mean, your stuff looks great. And if you've got any ideas, like, let us know. I gave him 4 ideas, and one of those was Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. And it was just so, it was just a weird, circuitous path of like to that point. And at that point, I think I was like 42, I think, and I thought I was going to be writing, directing first. And of course, like that, you realize like pretty early on, like, okay, so I actually can like write and direct on projects and features that get distributed internationally, and you still don't really make any money. Like it is possible to do. It's not that hard, actually, especially now to like get stuff out in the world. Like you can make stuff if you have the gumption and the stick-to-itiveness, that's required. Like you can run the marathon, you can make a movie. And so that's cool, but like it's kind of like being in a band at this point. And you have to approach it that way in the DIY sense. Like you can try and play the game and like get a big company to try and put a bunch of like maybe like 5-7 million into like a tier one project or something, and maybe they'll give you a shot at directing that and whatever. Like, good luck. But I mean, if you really want to make something, you can. You just do it on your own. And I'm way more comfortable in that space. I think that's also why comics really started resonating with me. I was like, I should have been doing comics this whole time. But I mean, shoulda, woulda. Like, I kind of worked out the way it should have, honestly. But when I got to Beneath the Trees, I just had they were like immediately like, oh yes, please send us everything. You send us the outlines, send us character sketches. Like, we love this idea. And so I did, and they were just like, we're gonna see if we want to greenlight this thing. And they put it up for the green light meeting they have where they say yes or no to projects, and everybody was on board of this, and so then the train left the station. We just started putting it together. I had a pretty full outline at that point, but that's how it came to be. Like I did not expect it to get the reception that it did. I'm very grateful that it was well received, but like it blew my mind. And so, but that's kind of how it came from where I thought I would be to where I ended up. Like that's pretty much the journey.
Wow. That arc, at least part of that arc, I've heard a bunch in comics, I think, with people get into comics as a kid and then at some point you like, put away your childish things and you go do some other
Sure.
stuff for a while and you kind of
Hmm.
come back to them again as an adult. And, I think it's interesting that across different mediums, you've been in the horror space too. When you were conceiving of Beneath the Trees, among these ideas that you were pitching, what was the inception? Was it a character like Samantha? Was it the setting in time or in space? The vibe? Where did it all begin?
It was with Samantha, and it was drawing. So part of that 6 year chunk of where I was just like, working on my drawing, and part of my practice was just like a daily drawing thing that I really leaned into probably around 2013, um, until like, boy, 2020, 2021. I was just drawing every day. I would draw every day, every morning, for like at least an hour, if not more, throughout the day. And one of those, I was really trying not to be precious about it. I just wanted to have a thing. Wanted to complete it and be done with it. And so it'd be like anywhere from like 40 minutes to like an hour and a half. I'd be doing this thing. One of them was this anthropomorphic bear, like walking down in like a little hill or something with a bloody axe over their shoulder. It didn't really look like it was a different design than Samantha, but it was a bear, and a lot of stuff just clicked as I drew it. And a lot of these drawings, these like daily drawings that I would do, kind of felt like slices out of a story. And then part of the fun is just being like, I don't know, where's this? Like, what's the before and after of this image? You know what I mean? And so with that one, it was like, well, it'd be kind of funny if there was a Richard Scarry sort of town, like busy town, and there was a bear that lived there that was a serial killer. Like that'd be kind of amusing, and really twisted in a twisted way. And like the more I thought of it, I was like, and everybody would be so naive to not even conceive that there could be a killer like this. There's something like it would just very much be just completely off their radar because of the innocence of the town. Was what I was thinking, and then. I was like later, I was like doing dishes or something, but I was just like, it'd be interesting if there was like two killers in this town and it really messed up the Bears deal. And they had to figure out who it was before the rest of the town figured out what the bear was up to. And then I was like, and it would be called like Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees from the Teddy Bears Picnic song. And all of that came together like probably within like 12 hours or something. And then the actual like I didn't and I just wrote that down into a like a Word doc type thing, like on Google Doc or something. And then where I keep a bunch of just like, a couple paragraph ideas.
Mm.
And that's what I pitched them essentially. And like I gave them like the, real broad strokes of like beginning, middle, end of what that would be. And how it would resolve, and then that was sort of it. But that was the main inception. Like the actual soup to nuts 6 issue breakdown was came after they were into it. And then but that main thrust was just that was it. That was just like doodling one day, and then I just kind of thought about it throughout the day, and that was it.
Wow. Yeah, throwing a couple of serial killers into Scary Town is a really brilliant, really good idea. And
Thanks.
something I was also thinking too while I was reading it, you know how people sort of talk about like the order Muppet versus chaos Muppet
Oh
dichotomy? This
yes,
is like an
yes, yeah,
order
yeah, yeah.
serial killer versus a
Yes,
chaos serial.
100%. That's 100% it. It was very, I mean, like, I came at it in a very similar way, but it was like the D&D,
Mm,
breakdown of like character breakdown of like, lawful, chaotic, and neutral. And so it was, but it was that. It was very much like the lawful evil versus chaotic evil. And that was funny because it felt like that was the hook. The challenge is like, how do you make a serial killer a main character? And it felt like a fun challenge, but a lot of it was like leaning on that cuteness and then leaning on like lawful versus chaotic. And this is like, I mean, I think it was like 2021 when I was sort of putting a lot of that together, 2022. So felt still very fresh from COVID and lockdowns, and the idea of having order was so appealing. I was like, this is the angle. Like, this is like, they don't want the chaos. Like, this is problematic. And so people will probably buy into wanting, like, rooting for Samantha, even though they know they shouldn't. I mean, technically, she's like the most evil out of anybody.
yeah.
Like, even though in the first book, and you're like, I mean, he, if anything, has forced the hand to sort of reveal the true evil.
Yeah.
But we're still somehow rooting for her in a weird, kind of horrible way. Or at least she comes out on top. So anyway.
But I do love that because you turn that on its head in Rite of Spring a little bit, right? Because
Oh,
you
for sure.
shift the focus a little bit from Samantha to the sibling of one of her victims. So can you talk about that choice and also the choice to make a jump in time? Because the first is in the mid 80s and this one's in the early 90s, right?
Yes.
Mm.
And there's a couple of reasons that I wanted to do that. One of them was like in the third chapter or issue, depending on how you read that first run, there's a funeral that happens for the goat. And there's like this acknowledgement that Samantha has to the repercussions that her actions have amongst the family members. And she like intellectually understands this is obviously like a part of it. Arguably worse because it's in absentia with a lot of the victims that she kills and essentially disappears. And so nobody really knows what happens. And that notion, I was like, as I was working on that issue there, I was like, well, if I do more, like, if they come at me asking for more, like, it would be this. It would be having a family member from her victim. Why not just make it the duck because we know this duck now? And to really have that, like, it was the idea of the obsession that would twist somebody up just to know, and that they would existentially redefine themselves as they have to know this. Like their new purpose in life is uncovering like what happened to the detriment of their social life and their physical life, health and everything and their mental health. And it was like, that would be so horrible. But you would need like time for that to get twisted. And so like, and also like, let's make it like 8 years. I don't know why I shied from making it even 10. But I did. I made it 8 years, and it was also there was just so much that could happen in between now and then. It felt like such a interesting way to do it. And if you ever wanted to revisit what happened in between, you could. It just felt like it was so flexible and fun, and it was also like probably in part inspired by I don't know if you're familiar with Battlestar Galactica.
Yes. Yeah.
But they do like one of the most mind-blowing time jumps in that modern series of it. And it affected me so much in an interesting way that I was just like, narratively, it was so fascinating to do that. I was like, you should. Why not? Like, let's do that. Like, let's allow that to sort of, we don't know what's been happening. Also, I'm essentially like going through my own um growth from like adolescence, from like child through adolescence through, as an adult, with this basically. So like I was like, well, we have to get into the 90s then. Like let's make it the 90s. Let's like globalization be a thing. The world essentially mirrors ours enough that like fairly, similar stuff is happening, like sociopolitically and so forth. So like, and economically, that it felt like an interesting way to sort of have that stuff bubbling in the background, like we hit no longer like the forest that she went to bury victims are like, they're becoming real estate development places, and she and by contrast, now she can go to like where factories used to be but aren't really populated anymore because we don't do the factories here anymore, and so that's now the new abandoned space. Like it felt like a really interesting way to sort of kind of touch on all that stuff.
That is really interesting. Yeah, like in movie terms, it struck me. I was like, oh, this is like ghost dog times, where it's like
Sure.
getting harder to slip under the radar, to live a
Yeah.
life like not surveilled, and
Oh
how that
yes.
really changes the nature of her work for so
Yes, absolutely. And it changes the nature of her work, and it also changes the way she just interacts with it. And that was very much, and it was the one thing where I think a lot of it is sort of frustrating for Samantha, but this one angle of like happening upon Monica was such a fascinating facet to it that she had never thought of. She kind of can't help herself but pursue it. And also like yeah, I guess I don't want to say too much to spoil it, but as you can see, like it's sort of she'd had a lot that she'd been thinking about. That was the other thing too, was like this time jump allowed for so much to just sort of be developed over these past 8 years. And then also, I mean, like it was that what happened in this first book was sort of traumatic for Samantha, which is funny to say, but like the idea that like she could have misstepped so much with such a chaotic, what she thought was like a lesser than, but had like gotten the best of her in a certain regard. So like that really rattled her. And as a result, like she took all these like very extreme steps to never let that happen again, especially with Woodbrook. And so that's kind of, yeah, where we find her.
nice. Yeah, it was such a delight to get to spend more time. Well, delight asterisk, spend more time in this world. And I really did enjoy seeing the passage of time, and also how the world around them changed and how that changes the characters. I
Yeah.
think
And the trauma, that was the other thing, the trauma that the characters who survived went through, and seeing how that evolved.
yeah.
And like it and how they carried it with them. Have they, if it, you see it, I mean, specifically with like Pauline or with Birdie, and how they've sort of, either become introverted or become like uh substance abuse, becoming a part of their life.
Mhm.
It felt like that was all like I really wanted to see that effect, like as opposed to just sort of doing a rehash of like what that first book was.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It felt really necessary. It felt like it was required, like for the characters and for that thing, if you're going to be genuine about it.
Yeah, it's like it's just obviously a sequel. It's a continuation, but it feels like a challenge too in some ways. Like it
For
challenges
sure.
you to rethink the first volume in some really, really interesting ways.
Yes, it is funny. A lot of the, and I mean, I've said it before elsewhere, but a lot of this feels like different exercises to just remind everybody that like Samantha's evil.
Yes.
And so like, and
Yeah.
so it's just like she's not like she will not be your friend. Like you cannot trust her with anything. Like but yeah, it definitely it's an interesting, as it develops and as the readership develops for the book, like the relationship with all that stuff is just like so interesting.
Mm. What is on your horizon? Are you writing anything right now? Do you have plans? What's in your creative future?
I'm working on volume 3 right now, so we're going back. And there's another time jump.
Nice.
Like big surprise. We're gonna be in the 2000s now. So the that is chugging away, and we have just announced the Halloween special, which is an anthology project, which is a Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees Halloween anthology is coming out in October. And for the first time, we're inviting other creators to also take part. So it's a really fun experiment for me. As we're just letting other people come in and play in Woodbrook. And it's basically like going to be, it's 4 stories that are be told around a campfire, and it takes place a couple years after Rite of Spring, and it's sort of like is taking the same sort of spot that we did a ash can prior to Rite of Spring that came out between those 2 books, and the first one that was like a prelude of her in Germany, backpacking in Germany just after college in 1962. So it was like very fun. Like, oh, we should do another thing that takes, that spot in between book 2 and book 3. And that's what this Halloween anthology is going to be. So James Tynion the Fourth, and Tyler Boss, and then Che Grayson, Matt Emmons, I believe Jared Cullum, and who is that? Everybody? I'm missing. And Tony Fleece and Dave Wachter are going to be doing that's the teams for all 4. So it should be pretty righteous. I'm doing interstitials in the beginning and the end, and then tying it all together, and it's going to be pretty rad.
Oh, that's amazing to hear. Oh, well, I can't wait to see those. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and our listeners. I'm so, so excited to get this book in people's hands here at the library.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And thank you, listeners. Please check out Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, Rite of Spring. It will be out when you hear this episode, so head to your favorite comic bookstore, library, website, wherever you like to go for your media. All right, everybody, thank you once again. It is now time to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.